Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Core studio. Welcome to the show. So the week of spoiler season is finally here, and okay, I do mean the week of, because technically spoiler season isn't supposed to start until Thursday. It is Monday, and yet here are some more potential spoilers because this keeps happening to the point where I am no longer surprised to wake up and see even more pictures of potential spoilers. Regardless, like all my other episodes on these potential spoilers, a disclaimer. Again, these potential spoilers have not been confirmed to be real. Though the cards look very real in the images, and we'll get to those here in a little bit, they are not guaranteed to be real, so please take everything with a grain of salt that I am saying, and yeah, come to your own conclusions. But with that being said, what are these new crazy powerful potential dragon cards? Let's jump into it to find out. So the image that was posted on the internet for these potential spoilers was this one, and yeah, it's actually one of the more clear images that we have seen, though obviously, the way that these cards are positioned, there are a couple that we can't see the entire text on, and we'll get on that here in a bit. That being said, with these spoilers, we are seeing some that we've already seen so far, an actual official spoiler with Atsushi the Blazing Sky in the bottom left, and then actually Junji the Midnight Sky in the top right. We have seen that as another potential spoiler, not confirmed. But there are three other dragons with Kairi, Ao, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing any of these wrong, and then the bottom right green one, which I believe other people have actually pointed out what the name is probably, and I will talk about that when we get to the actual card. But right now, it's just, you can see it as Boundless Sky. That being said, it appears that we now have the full cycle of the legendary dragon spirits that we were expecting to see in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So let's tackle these dragons one at a time, and again, a big thank you to MTG.design for existing and allowing me to create custom versions of these cards to make them easier to discuss. First up, let's talk about the mono blue dragon with Kairi the Swirling Sky, a question mark dragon spirit. Again, we can only see part of the actual picture for this one. That costs 4 blue. Now, Kairi has flying and ward 3, so there is some protection there, and it says when it dies, choose one. So like the other two dragons that we have seen so far, this is a death trigger, which we also actually saw in the original Kamigawa dragons, but this gives us a choice like the new ones have been. And our choices are return any number of target non-land permanents with total mana value, and potentially or less to their owner's hands. Again, part of the text was cut off on this one, so some of these parts are assumed and pretty good assumptions, but the actual mana value is questionable. And the other option is mill 6 cards and return up to target instant and/or sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand. Now, really quick, if I had to guess what these question marks were, well, seeing this is a dragon that costs 6 mana, and then we also can see that it's going to mill 6, I would assume that this dragon is actually a 6/6, but I very well could be wrong on that. And then the total mana value I would think would also be 6, but I don't think we're going to be returning up to 6 target instant or sorcery cards from our graveyard to your hand, or this thing would be, well, absolutely busted. Now, when it comes to that second choice, again, mill 6 cards and return up to target instant and or sorcery cards, with the way that it's written, and again, I could be wrong on this, but I believe that this would have to at least be 2, because again, the word cards is present. And a death trigger that brings back 2 instant and or sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand is huge, especially after milling yourself 6 cards to give you access to potentially even more cards to get back. And obviously that first option is a fantastic one as well. Again, my assumption is the total mana value is 6. So you'd be able to split that up and be able to bounce multiple things most likely, or one big thing. That being said, when it comes to an actual deck being built around this card as the commander, there are a lot of things that you can do just because of the color that it's in. Because, of course, blue is the color of clone cards, like Clone, or Cackling Counterpart, or, of course, Right of Replication. Clone and other cards like it are essentially creatures that can become copies of other creatures, and Clone is kind of the original. It costs 3 and a blue, and that's why they're called clones. Now, the reason that a clone can be so good with this commander is because of its death trigger. Well, and because of the legend rule. But basically, you get the clone out, you make it a copy of your commander, and then it says, oh no, there are 2 of us, we're legendary, we have to lose 1, so you just lose the clone, and then you get that death trigger. So simply by cloning your commander, you can either balance a good amount of things, again assuming that the total mana value is 6, again we're not sure on that, but that's my thought, or you can get a lot of value by milling yourself 6 cards, then being able to get, again my assumption is, 2 instant and or sorcery cards back from your graveyard to your hand. Which of course can be abused even further with clone spells like Cackling Counterpart. It's an instant that costs 1 blue, and it's going to create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. In other words, hey, make a clone of target creature. So you could simply just cast this, make a copy of your commander, mill 6, then get this back and another instant and or sorcery. Basically, 3 mana, mill yourself 6, and get 2 things back. And I highly doubt that it's more than 2, but if it is, my goodness, is that an absurd amount of value. Speaking of which, of course, when we're talking about these clone effects and ways to use and abuse them, Right of Replication is incredibly just powerful with a lot of commanders out there. It's a sorcery that has kicker 5, and it says create a token that's a copy of target creature. If this spell was kicked, create 5 of those tokens instead. So kick this, make 5 token copies of your commander, and get its death trigger 5 times. So of course you can bounce a ton of things with that, or you can get a lot of cards in your graveyard, then a lot of cards back. And yeah, there's a lot of very powerful things that you can do with something like this. Now again, with these assumptions that are made and what the rest of the text in the card is, I can see a very powerful build being built around this commander that utilizes cards to, well, just keep things going. So you could probably utilize cards like High Tide, Dramatic Reversal, and Temporal Manipulation, and just keep trying to clone your commander and get these back over and over and over again. High Tide is an instant for just a blue mana that says until end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds blue to their mana pool. And yes, this can stack, so if you've cast multiple High Tides in a turn, that just keeps adding, so your island set for more and more and more. Again, if you've got clone spells like Cackling Counterpart, you can just make copies of your commander, and then get this back and Cackling Counterpart, and do it again, and your island set for more and more and more. And, maybe you've got a Dramatic Reversal, which can untap all non-land permanents you control. So if you've got a lot of mana rocks out, you can just keep casting this, getting those mana rocks to untap, and do it again and again and again. Essentially, if your mana rocks can generate you enough mana, you can probably make infinite mana with this, and basically mill your entire library, and cast every single instant sorcery you want over and over again. Or, you could just utilize a card like Temporal Manipulation, a fantastically powerful extra turn spell that just costs 5 mana and says take an extra turn for this one, and what it doesn't say is exile this card. So again, just keep making copies of your commander, getting back that clone copy spell, and then also this extra turn spell, and congratulations, you've got infinite turns. And of course, there are plenty of ways to win from there. But of course, one of those ways in mono blue is just to utilize that mill to actually win you the game by utilizing cards like Thassa's Oracle, Jace Wielder Mysteries, and Laboratory Maniac. So when your commander keeps milling you and ends up milling your entire library, you actually just win the game with one of these 3. Thassa's Oracle has, when it enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is your devotion to blue, put up to 1 of them on top of your library, and the rest of them on your library in a random order. If X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. Jace Wielder Mysteries says if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead, and by +1ing this, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library in their graveyard, then draws a card. And of course, the OG Labman wins. Laboratory Maniac has, if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. Now, of course, outside of utilizing the mill to win the game through one of these 3 cards, there are plenty of ways to win if you're basically going infinite with your commander and the combination of cards. Yeah, there are plenty of ways to win when you've got infinite extra turns, or you can cast spells infinitely. Again, please keep in mind that, again, this is a potential spoiler, and again, assumptions were made with some of the words on this card. Next up, though, a card where we can see basically the entire card outside of the name, though I believe some people out there either have heard the name or saw the name somewhere. I'm sure that there's some lore pieces out there that probably have the exact name of this card, and so I'm just assuming this is correct. Please correct me below in the comments, though, if I'm not right, though. Kura the Boundless Sky. Kura is a 4/4 dragon spirit with flying and death touch, and it costs 3 green. It has, when it dies, choose 1. Search your library for up to 3 land cards, reveal them, put them in your hand, then shuffle. Or create an XX green spirit creature token where X the number of lands you control. So, like the other dragons, still a very powerful death trigger, though in my opinion, at least when it comes to them actually being a commander, this one isn't quite as powerful or as abusable as the mono blue one, though again, still very powerful. Being able to go get any 3 land cards can of course be a fantastic thing that can set yourself up in a lot of different ways. Now the second part unfortunately isn't quite as splashy. Create an XX green spirit creature token where X the number of lands you control. That's not a bad effect, but it's not one that, well, at least in Commander, is gonna be nearly as impactful. Now, if that token were to have trample, it would of course be a lot more threatening, but at this point, because it has no evasion, it can just be chump blocked pretty easily, or, just dealt with by something as simple as a bounce spell. That being said, if you're going to build a deck around this commander, I believe that you'd probably be focusing mostly on the lands. Obviously, in mono green, you've got plenty of ways to ramp and get even more lands out, and yeah, there are a lot of fantastic lands out there to pick from. I mean, this commander itself, just with its death trigger, can go get you all 3 of the Urza lands with Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Tower. Each of them may just tap for 1 on their own, but as soon as you've got all 3 of them in play, in total they are tapping for 7 mana, with 2 of them tapping for 2 and 1 tapping for 3. So just being able to go get these 3 pieces can ramp you incredibly quickly if you're able to get them out, pretty quickly after your commander dies and you go tutor these up. Which I mentioned before, of course, is very doable with access to green. Green is, of course, the color of ramp, and you've got access to the best ramp spells like, Rampant Growth, but you also have ways to play additional lands with cards like Druid Class, Azusa Lost But Seeking, and Sky Shroud Ranger. When you level up Druid Class to level 2, it says you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Azusa takes this a step further by letting you play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. And Sky Shroud Ranger has tap, you may put a land card from your hand into play, place ability only time you can play a sorcery. So again, there are many ways to get even more lands into play after you've got them into your hand with, again, your commander's death trigger. So even just say getting those Urza lands into play can be very simple, and you can do it incredibly quickly. Maybe throw some landfall synergies in there and you're gonna have a good time. And speaking of synergy, some other types of cards that I just want to bring up are cards like Reincarnation and, okay, very expensive card, but of course, Doubling Season. Reincarnation says choose target creature. When that creature dies this turn, return a creature card from its owner's graveyard to the battlefield under the control of that creature's owner. Now, there aren't too many effects like this in green, but this is one way to essentially get your commander right back when it dies. That being said, of course, in green, there are plenty of ways to get cards out of your graveyard and back into your hand, and there are plenty of even more ways to get specifically creature cards out of your graveyard and back in your hand, so you can get around the commander tax, though you might not really need to, again, with the amount of lands that you can get in play and the amount that you can ramp with a commander like this. And the other card that I brought up was Doubling Season, or, like card like Primal Vigor, which essentially is going to double up the number of tokens that you're going to make. So if you want to more so utilize that death trigger that focuses on tokens, go for it. Just find ways to actually create even more value when you are making those tokens. And again, you probably want to find a way to get that token through, or give it trample, etc, etc, etc. But now let's move on to the final dragon, and again, my apologies if I'm mispronouncing this, Ao the Dawn Sky. It's a 5/4 dragon spirit with flying and vigilance that costs 3 green. It has, when it dies, choose 1, look at the top 7 cards of your library, put any number of non-land permanent cards with total mana value 4 or less among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And the other option is put 2+1 counters on each permanent you control that's a creature or a vehicle. So these options are actually really interesting, and I think it's pretty fantastic that this commander actually specifies vehicles in it as well, so that if you do want to build a vehicle deck around this commander, well, you don't have to ensure that your vehicles are actually crewed at the time that this commander does die. You can just get counters on them and still benefit even when they're not creatures. That being said, between the 2 of these death triggers, the one that I would definitely probably focus more on is that first one, because yeah, that's some pretty fantastic card advantage in mono white. Digging into the top 7 cards of our library is pretty far down, and yeah, being able to choose exactly what we want that's got a total mana value of 4 or less and putting it onto the battlefield is great. Though again, I guess I should specify non-land permanents, because that would probably be pretty broken if it was including lands as well. Regardless, even without lands, you can get a ton of value out of this death trigger and get a lot of things in play. And the first thought that I had with this commander is probably to build a deck focusing around on very low mana cost artifacts, and yeah, there are a ton of fantastic ones out there. Of course, Soul Ring is an option, Esper Sentinel, and Skull Clamp are other ones. There are a ton of artifacts to pick from out there in Magic's history that you can easily get out with this commander just by getting the commander out and having it die, and then getting, some small artifacts off the top. I mean, the lower the mana cost of your things in this deck, the more things that you can get into play. Soul Ring, of course, is kind of like the poster child of commander. It's an artifact that just costs 1, and it taps for 2. So being able to get low mana cost artifacts into play can ramp you really quickly with this commander when it dies. And then Esper Sentinel says, when an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. So it's kind of like a mono-white creature version of Mystic Remora. And of course, Skull Clamp is an incredibly powerful draw engine on an equipment that has equipped creature gets +1/-1, and whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards, equip 1. But yeah, I'm just highlighting a couple of artifacts, and there are plenty of them out there that either cost, 1 or maybe even 2, or you probably could even utilize artifacts that just cost 0, so that doesn't add to that total mana value. You can get even more things in play. Next up, of course, another direction that you could take this commander, because it's specified again that this does help vehicles with its death trigger, are, well, a vehicle tribal deck. So utilize fantastic vehicles like Smuggler's Copter or Heart of Kirin and Parhelion 2. Get your commander out, have your commander die, and get more and more counters on your vehicles, and crew them up and swing out, and yeah, vehicle tribal can be a really fun thing. Or, if you want, you can do a go-wide strategy that focuses on, low-to-the-ground creatures as well as vehicles, or just those low-to-the-ground creatures. This commander can be pretty flexible with that direction, or this one, or again, the way that I would build it, again, focusing more so on those low-to-the-ground artifacts. Regardless, some other kinds of cards to consider are ways to actually get your commander back with things like Resurrection or Second Sunrise, or even something like Cleric class. Resurrection is just your typical Reanimator card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Whereas Second Sunrise says each player returns to play all artifact, creature, enchantment, and land cards that were put into their graveyard from play this turn. Again, in that artifact build, you maybe have some artifacts that either sacrifice themselves for value or other things for value, or again, like Skull Clamp, you equip and then lose creatures and then draw cards. Second Sunrise and spells like it can just be a massive spell to give you a ton of value getting your commander back as well as everything else. And Cleric class is a very low to the ground permanent that just costs 1 mana, so again, with that total mana value of 4, this just takes up 1 of it, which is a huge value. And by, getting to level 3 by paying 4 and a white, when it becomes level 3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, you gain life equal to its toughness. So again, to get around, building up that commander tax and having to pay it over and over again, maybe you can include permanents like this one that you can actually get out with your commander's death trigger to help get it back in play. Regardless, at the end of the day, again, please remember that these are just, at this point, potential spoilers. They have not been confirmed, and, especially with that first one that we went over, there are even parts of the card that we can't read. So, yeah, again, please take everything I've said today with a grain of salt. That being said, if these are real cards, they are really exciting, and I'm sure there are a lot of players out there that are excited to build around these as commanders and put them in the 99 of decks, Dragon Tribal just keeps getting more and more powerful things. And if Kairi actually works in the way that I think it does, and those, assumptions that are being made on those question marks are correct, well, that can be an incredibly powerful commander again that I think could go infinite pretty easily, so be on the lookout for that. And speaking of being on the lookout, make sure on the lookout for more potential spoilers in the lead up to actual spoiler season kicking off this week on the 27th, which again is Thursday. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.